A24 presents the follow-up to a film that possessed a nation. The Puritan 2.
Cut! The blood's wrong. Molly Bennett, meet Maxxine Minx.
Pleased to meet you. Sorry.
We've all got blood on our hands now.
The past ain't finished with you, Maxxine. Ain't nowhere to hide. There's show business. You never work in this town again.
Maxxine, what are you hiding?
I've seen the devil stalking me. I can feel his power.
We've made it to the belly of the beast. You must eliminate all distractions, or the beast will spit you right back out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, potential starlets. Which, I mean, might not have any of them listening, but, you know, in case they are, how you doing? And how the hell you doing, Mike? I'm doing pretty well.
Doing well. Just still going through the crazy-ass heat wave, but that's pretty common for summers in California. So
You're trying to survive it, and I'm loving it. Go figure.
All right, also with us, it's Don and Ellie. How's it going, Don?
Hey, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
All right. Well, we are covering the third in the trilogy, or the Ty West trilogy. It is Maxxxine. So, yeah, theatrical release, kind of pretty much said it at the end of the last episode. So I'll keep that short and get the synopsis off IMDb. In 1980s Hollywood, adult film star and aspiring actress Maxxxine Minx finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. Okay, so general thoughts. I think maybe at the end of this episode, since this is the third in the trilogy, maybe we can just do like a quick ranking of the trilogy, I guess. But for now, we'll keep it to Maxxxine. So Venom, what are your general thoughts on Maxxxine?
I mean, this is a movie that I was not excited to watch going into it. If you guys, longtime listeners, if you remember, I was not very high on Pearl. Especially considering most of the community was very high on Pearl. Everybody was loving Mia Goth in that film, and it just didn't really work for me. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that at the end of the episode. But as far as Maxxxine goes, it's okay, and okay is the best I can really give this movie. First off, it's barely a horror film. It really feels more like a police procedural drama more than anything. There is some gore, and when I say some, I mean minuscule amounts. I mean, we get one juicy one at the end and one very painful one towards the beginning of the movie, but otherwise, yeah, this is definitely not a gore fest. The trailer is a little bit of a misnomer because they mention the Night Stalker in the trailer, and they do mention the Night Stalker in the movie too, but unfortunately the actual Night Stalker does not have as much to do with this movie as the trailer may have implied. It was just an event that was happening at the same time that Maxxxine, was hitting her little bit of notoriety in Hollywood. It just happened to be a moment in time more than anything. So I was, when I had heard that there was mention of the Night Stalker in the trailer, I thought that he might be a bigger part of this story, and really he's not a part of this story at all, other than some newsreels here and there. The mystery of this one just didn't really do much for me. Like, who is this person that is stalking Maxxxine and taking out people that are around her? But once we get the reveal, I literally let out an audible groan in the theater. I just did not care. Once we got the reveal, it started to get mildly interesting when we got the reveal, because there was kind of like a reveal of a more organized plot going on here, more individuals involved than just one person. But it just, it just leaned too heavily into that mid to late 80s satanic panic scare stuff, and I already lived through that, and it was frustrating when I was living through it, being a heavy metal fan and a horror movie fan in the mid 80s, and having to deal with, you know, the news constantly telling me that there's Satanists out there killing our youth when there absolutely was not. But, you know, again, that's a story for another podcast. So just the elements of this movie didn't really do a lot for me. I will say seeing old Hollywood was awesome. I'm more familiar with old New York. So like, you know, early to mid New York horror movies, stuff like Basket Case. That's the stuff that really gets my nostalgia juices flowing. I didn't move to California until the year 2000, but it was still really cool because I was a heavy metal fan in the 80s, and obviously LA was a big metal scene. So to actually see some of this stuff and some of the fashions from the time and things like that, it is mildly nostalgic, but like I said, it's the complete opposite coast for me. So this one definitely doesn't speak to me the way something set in New York in the early to mid 80s would be. One thing I did like about this movie is that it's not all Mia Goth the way Pearl was. Pearl just was way too much Mia Goth, and if you're a fan of hers, awesome. I myself am not. I have yet to be impressed by any performance that she has given us, and I know that's going to be a very contentious statement to make, considering some people absolutely adore her, and that's fine. You like who you like, and you dislike who you dislike. There's nothing wrong with either one, but for me personally, Mia Goth has done very little for me in either her acting, her attractiveness. I don't find her attractive in any way, shape, or form. Not that that's important, of course. I'm not trying to lay, I'm not trying to do like, sexual guidelines or anything, or attractiveness guidelines for who should be in movies. In fact, I love when less attractive people are in movies. But in this particular role, it's a very glamorous role, and I don't know, Mia Goth just doesn't fit the bill for me. And she's, like I said, I can go off on a major tangent on how much I dislike Mia Goth, but I'm just going to end it right there. Sorry, Dave Z, I know you love her, but I can't stand her. Once I find a movie that I really like that she actually enhances, I'll be the first one to, claim it from the mountain that, I like something that she did. Hey, look how long it took for Eli Roth to make a movie that I like. So, Mia Goth still has about 20 years of waiting if she has to wait as long as Eli Roth did. But I did like this movie because of everyone else that was in the film. It was great to see Giancarlo. It was great to see Kevin Bacon. It was great to see Halsey. I know Halsey is not an ultra popular pop star, but I met Halsey a couple of times because she actually performed at the AT&T Christmas party when I worked at AT&T. This would have been well before she had a record deal. This would have been probably sometime in 16, 17, sometime in that range. And she's still not a huge pop star necessarily, but I mean, people who listen to pop music regularly know who Halsey is. So, and if you're a regular watcher of Saturday Night Live, you know that she was a host and a musical guest last year, I believe, for the Valentine's Day episode. So just everyone else in this movie is what made this movie watchable for me, especially Giancarlo and Kevin Bacon. I thought they both did really well. I would have loved to have seen more Giancarlo. We only get him for, a few scenes here and there, some scattered scenes, even though he plays like a real badass character. I kind of like him. It's almost like he's almost like a Hollywood agent, but with mob ties. And and obviously it fits Giancarlo Esposito for, the Breaking Bad years, of course. And Kevin Bacon, great job as the private detective, acting like the tough, wise guy that he is, but then turning into a mushy ball of jelly when he himself is threatened. So overall, the movie is okay. It's middle of the road for me. Mia Goth does nothing for me. So if she's going to be the main star, she has to put out a performance like she's never done in her life, because I'm just not a fan. I don't want to say anything negative personally about her. I've never met the woman. She could be a lovely woman for all I know. But A, I don't think she's a very good actress. B, I don't think she's nearly as attractive as everyone thinks, that everyone claims that she is. And her movies just, to me, aren't as compelling. I think that's probably why I liked X so much, because she's not the major catalyst for that movie. Even though, yes, a Mia Goth character is, at least it's not Maxxine. So it doesn't look like Mia Goth. I'm not having to stare at her. I actually enjoyed her performance as Pearl in X. I thought that was probably one of her best performances. And my favorite of the franchise, which is a little bit of a spoiler for later, but yeah, actually the only movie of this trilogy that I'll ever watch again is X. So yeah, all I can say is that if you're a fan of the first two movies and you really enjoyed it, then it's more Ty West, it's more Mia Goth, it's great 80s aesthetic without, jamming it down your throat. The score is pretty cool. Got a good 80s pop score. You even got some kind of deeper cut rock songs on there, which I thought was pretty cool. But overall, this story, just this overall trilogy as a story, does very little for me. Pearl and Maxxine, I understand that Pearl and Maxxine are the same person, literally, if not figuratively. Both of them had stars in their eyes. Both of them wanted to be, both of them thought they deserved more than they actually did, which, it's a story that might work for some people. But I guess because I live in Hollywood, I've worked out here, I've been on movie sets, I've done sound work, both on productions and in post-production. So I don't know, to see someone that acts like a Maxxine, that person's not really going to be a star for too very long in this industry, treating people like that. But as a film, it's an okay police procedural. Like I said, I don't look at this as a horror movie. This movie looks like a kind of a Night Stalker wannabe investigative type film. We've got a couple of police characters in here doing investigations. And then the whole thing just kind of ends like it ends like a Charles Bronson movie. You know what I mean? It doesn't end like a horror movie. It doesn't end like a Ty West film. And that's probably always going to be my biggest contention with this, is that it just doesn't feel horror enough from a director who before this trilogy I absolutely adored. The Sacrament, I fucking love The Sacrament. I love almost everything that he has done before Pearl, I guess, because I still did really enjoy X. But yeah, I'm always going to be tepid on this franchise, so I might be the wrong guy to get your opinions from on this one, because I have this weird hate relationship with Mia Goth. But hopefully one day I'll be able to get past her. I'll be able to look past her and actually be able to see a good performance, good storytelling, things like that. But thus far I haven't gotten it. So yeah. For me, Maxxine's, kind of middle of the road, maybe even leaning towards the bad side of the road as far as this franchise is concerned. I'll take this one over Pearl. I've already said that, mainly because of the variety of notable stars that are in it. I think the storytelling is better in X and in Maxxine than in Pearl. I mean, Pearl, there is no story. We're just watching some chick, get crazier and crazier and kill people. There's no real fucking story. There's no arc there. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Pearl has no arc. She starts out the movie crazy, she ends the movie crazy, and then you just spend 2 hours with her in between. And it's like, that's not really an entertaining movie to me. I want to see an arc. I want to see a catalyst event that makes her the way that she is. We never see that, at least with Pearl. And we never see it with Maxxine either. Not that Maxine's necessarily a serial killer, though she does have a high fucking body count. That's for damn sure. But yeah, this movie just doesn't really do a whole hell of a lot for me. I'm trying to be as, liberal as possible. I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on this movie, but for me personally, it just does very little for me. And I probably will never return to it. So yeah, middle of the road at best for me. And I'll leave my general thoughts at that.
Okay, I'll swing it over to Don. What were your thoughts on Maxxine?
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with Venom. Probably a little bit lower even. I saw a comment from a friend of mine a day or two after I had seen it. And I really wish I had wrote it down who it was so I could give you credit, because it's not my thought, but it summed up everything I could. It summed up my thoughts on the film, even though I didn't know what it meant. And when I read it, it kind of solidified what it was. But this just feels like a PG-13 version of a Brian De Palma movie. And it really kind of struck me when he said that and he explained what it was about. That's kind of really what this is. I mean, Venom is pretty much spot on. This really doesn't feel like a horror film. It's much more police procedural. It tries to think it's sleazy, but it's really not. cuts away from just about everything. There's very little gore. I mean, if Mia Goth is sexual to you, then I mean, you do you, because I'm just like Venom. I don't find her attractive at all. But I mean, there's like almost very little nudity in this. It cuts away from it at the very beginning, so it's like, okay, we're gonna give you this sleazy atmosphere, but we're not gonna dwell in it. Like, it pulls its punches, and it doesn't have any kind of visceral impact the way X did, where it was very upfront and deliberate about it, where the violence was much more on screen, much more brutal, much more impactful, and yeah, there were a few tits in there. So yeah, that kind of made it stand out from the pack just because of everything else that was going on at the time. But yeah, this just doesn't have the same kind of punch it thinks it does, where it thinks because, oh, she's a porn star, oh, this is people are doing drugs in the back alleys, people are shooting up and making deals with skeezy agents to try to further their career, but all they're after is their money. It tries to make you think it's a much more risque environment than it really is, and when it tries to do those kinds of things, it really falls flat on its face, and none of it really has any kind of lasting impression. I mean, I don't even really remember what the kills are, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they are in the walkthrough, because I can't even tell you what they are right now, to be honest. Like, I don't even remember who even gets killed or, how. So, I mean, there's kind of no real lasting impression here. And yeah, Maxxine is just not that interesting. I mean, you think she would have learned by now because this is the third time together, but she's really not that impressive. And I mean, even in, X, when the first thing we see is, her in the, adult film world trying to, make the films better than what they really are. But, the director is just like, we're shooting porn here. Stop trying to, class it up and think it's better than what it really is. We're, shooting an adult movie, take your top off and spread them. Like, that's kind of what she's like here, where she tries to think she's, improving these kinds of movies to better herself. And it doesn't really have any kind of impact, where I don't know. It just doesn't have any lasting impression for me. And yeah, okay, it's shot well. It looks good. The cast is great. Kevin Bacon's hilarious. I loved every scene he was in. It's Giancarlo or Giancarlo?
Yeah. Either one's correct, I think.
Okay, yeah, because I've heard it both ways, and I never know how to pronounce his first name yet. But yeah, he was great. His character really, really should have been in the film more. But yeah, I mean, there's just, a few middling areas here and there. I mean, the technical qualities are always going to look really good. It's an A24 film still, so, those features are still going to look nice. It's still going to have that professional sheen that, makes it look, a lot better than a lot of the indie stuff that most of us watch. And yeah, it's not boring. I'll give it that. It stays you stay invested in it, and it doesn't really drag or have boring scenes, even though it's generally a police investigation. And it does have a little bit of a giallo quality with that, because you realize that's kind of where a lot of that genre kind of dwelled. But yeah, it just feels at the very end like a PG-13 version of a Brian De Palma movie from the 80s, and it doesn't really hold much interest for me. It is better than Pearl, but yeah, this is still like a mile below X. I still think that's kind of the best of the trilogy, and really the only one worth watching. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested in the storyline, give it a shot. Support for in theaters, all that kind of BS. But yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think there's much rewatch value for this one. You watch it once just to finish the trilogy, and then you're done and move on from it. So I really don't have much else to add to that. So I guess back to you, Mike.
All right. So I largely agree with you guys on all your criticism. I think I'm like a tad higher, but not by much. I actually kind of liked like the first act and maybe somewhat going into the second act, but I feel like there's a certain character who dies that I won't spoil, obviously, for the non-spoiler section. That once they're out of the movie, it feels like the movie takes a turn into like silliness, and it just it didn't take me out of the movie. Obviously, I'm still kind of watching it and paying attention, but it just felt like it was a different movie at that point. I kind of feel like the Maxxine character is just not that interesting. I think that's a problem. Like like Venom said, kind of with Pearl, like there's no arc. It's a crazy character being a crazy character. I feel like it's sort of the same with Maxxine. That character, it's pretty much the same character from the moment she's on screen in X to now. It's no surprise that she was struggling to make it in Hollywood when you kind of see her actions and stuff. Like it, I can't see.
And also even more so just with the news about what happened earlier today with the lawsuit and everything.
Yeah,
I mean that makes even more sense.
True. So
That
I
put a
kind
smile
of
on my face.
what I liked about early in the movie is like when she was like auditioning, and when I wanted to see more of just like, let's see how this movie's being made and have all the other stuff kind of the backdrop of that, but it seemed like they went away from that. We get introduced to like lots of characters who just kind of like come in for like a scene or two, and then you either don't hear from them again, or they're just kind of dead off screen, and it doesn't. And once we get the reveal later on in the movie, it's like, well, why did this person even care about any of them to begin with? It's another kind of like convoluted grand scheme of like, this is my mission, this is what I'm doing, but it all to just get to Maxxine. Like, you could have just gone directly to her in the first place. Like there's no need for this grand display. There's a couple okay kills, but like I said, a lot of it's off screen. A lot of the movie does feel tame. It's like it's like Don said, I wouldn't go as far to say PG-13 level, but it definitely has the feeling of like a tamer movie that wants to have like the dirty kind of grimy De Palma paint job over top of it.
Well, I'll say this right now. That, like I said, that was my friend's quote, and I did find it here. It's Ian Urza. So yeah, shout out to you for you saying that, because I saw it like a day or two after, and as soon as it popped up in my feed, like that was kind of like, oh yeah, you're right, it is. So it's Ian Urza who said that, and I will shout him out because I've been looking for it ever since I said it. So my fault for not looking it up beforehand, but yeah, I was doing it while you were talking. So yeah, that's where I got it from.
Yeah, okay, no worries. I think there's like, obviously there's a couple things in it that would make it R, but I don't think it's like a hard R. I think it was kind of advertised like it was going to be like this super grimy, sleazy Hollywood underbelly, and they try to reflect that in some of the characters, but like, I don't know, the story itself didn't seem that like over the top. Obviously the 80s aesthetic, but by now it just feels like, okay, like, so you're just picking a few different 80s songs and we've heard in other movies depicting the 80s. Like we get it by now. Yes, we can all pull up Spotify or whatever and pick our 80s songs to put in our 80s movie. Yeah, I felt like the story itself wasn't interesting, and it's disappointing. I will say I was interested in the setup, but like the more the movie went along, the less I kind of cared about what was going on with the story. My favorite part of this movie is probably Kevin Bacon, like doing whatever kind of shtick he was doing as a detective. I got a kick out of that, and like his interactions with Maxxine were cool. I wanted to see more of him than anybody else. Like I stopped caring about Maxxine, like, because at one point it's like once she gets the part in the movie, it's like, well, now like it was achieved so early in the movie. It's like, okay, I don't care about like the rest of this. They have the Night Stalker stuff going on kind of as a backdrop. I understand it was happening during the time, but I don't know, like that didn't really play much into the story itself, other than what's going on could be copycats. Okay, that's kind of general and vague. Overall, yeah, I would say like the strength of this movie is like in the first act. But by the time you get to the third act, to me, it becomes a little silly, and it almost feels like a different movie we're watching, other than the fact that it is, obviously still Maxxine in it. But yeah, I would call it middle of the road. And really, I think the community is kind of reflective. This movie does have like the people championing it, but like the more once it had been out for like more days, I see like people kind of like cooling off on it. So yeah, we'll see once we rank them. I mean, I know Venom's getting Dawn kind of given their statement about what's the top one, but we can get into that more a little later after our spoiler section.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'll leave it at that for the moment. So back to you, Venom.
Yeah, there were so many interesting side stories that they could have kind of highlighted more in the movie, like the copycat killer. After we don't even find out what he's doing to these people, to some of these victims, until the very end of the movie when a suitcase just happens to open up, and it's like, why couldn't I have seen that scene? You know, I want to see how that person got in the suitcase. That's a horror scene right there. You know, there's very few legit horror scenes in this movie.
Or when detectives are finding bodies and like we find out later like what exactly is going on, but I wanted to see those interactions because like what was happening with them if they were in the same position as Maxxxine at a certain point, like why did we not see that? Like I feel like that was wasted opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like they didn't show us any of those real intense kill scenes because of the reveal of who the killer was. And let's just say the advanced age of that particular person. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that person was the man in black in every scene in the movie. It could have been another member of the organization, because like I said earlier, I did mention that this kid, it kind of goes into a more of a group effort than, you know, one person just stalking and killing people. So potentially that could have been it, but that's another plot point that was just left dangling. Like, we never actually find out who the man in black is. We make the assumption. I mean, I think the movie is implying that it's a very particular, one particular person, but it almost like the scene where he kills the black dude in the video store. Are we to expect that? Are we expected to believe that this old guy killed that young black dude in the video store? I don't know. He did kind of surprise him. He got him from behind, so I guess maybe. But yeah, I think that's why we didn't see any of the kill scenes, because it wouldn't make sense. It's kind of like in Scream 5 when, you know, and sorry for the spoiler if you haven't seen it yet, but the scene where Dewey dies. And it's implied that it was the female wearing the costume during that scene, but somehow a teenage girl was able to lift Sheriff Dewey up off the ground somehow. Bullshit. Fucking bullshit. And I guess potentially that might be why we didn't see any kill scenes in this one, because of the reveal of who the killer actually was, which obviously we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah. But I'm not necessarily defending the movie. It's a stupid fucking reason. You know, and ultimately, I mean, hell, the whole reasoning of the fucking killer is dumb. Dumb as shit. It's like, you're talking about Satanists doing this and that, but you're the fucking evil ones. And that's always the story. It's always the story.
Yeah.
You know,
I felt too like that Ty West, he sort of like wanted the kudos of like the appearance of giallo-esque stuff in this movie just by the costume, but like you didn't put in the work with the story or even having the killer on screen very much, because if you know, for people that actually watch giallo, like usually that stuff is happening on screen. You're getting a lot of the stalking, the music. This one, it just felt like, well, I'll do just enough to like say that I'm paying homage to like giallo, but like, come on, man, like that's just like window dressing.
Yeah, that's kind of like saying that your movie is Lovecraftian because there's tentacles in it, which I have seen, actually, my friends. Let us not forget The Outwaters, that fucking movie that claimed to be Lovecraftian because there's some fucking tentacles at the end. Ooh, no, yeah, yeah, you can't just have one element of something and call it, you know, an homage to that thing. No, you can't just have a guy in black and
I was gonna say, not to mention there was like very little mystery as to who the killer was. Like,
To an extent, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're really paying attention, it's all revealed at the very beginning of the movie. The fucking opening scene reveals so much. If you're paying attention, if you're a savvy horror fan, paying attention, yeah.
Well, I probably not. I actually won't say it because I was like, to me, it would have been more giallo for someone else in the movie to have been the killer, but I can't really say that because I don't want to spoil anything. But
Yeah.
because there were some other options, there were like some other characters that, to me, if they would have been revealed as the killer, it would have been much more of like a giallo-esque like twist of like, oh, holy shit, and then you give them a motivation and all that, but. The way it turned out is just like, oh, really? Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I honestly thought it was the black dude for a little while. When he made that line about "I'm the only guy not trying to fuck you," I'm like, oh, because you're trying to kill her. But I was wrong.
I'll be honest, yeah. I'll be honest, yeah. That was one scene too that I kind of was like, okay, yeah, you're like high on my list now.
Yeah, you're a red herring, definitely. But,
yeah.
We end up. It's another one of those situations where it's another Friday, original Friday the 13th, where the killer turns out to be somebody we haven't even seen in the goddamn movie. At least we heard their voice, though. So at least they were technically in the movie. Just you didn't see them, is all. But yeah. This movie, just like I said, there's enough plot holes in here and just dumb characters that it just kind of leaves you. It leaves you flat. It leaves you wanting more. I mean, like I said, I love Ty West. I still will stand on the Ty West hill. I still really enjoy Ty West. I love most of his movies. X was great. Pearl and Maxxxine still had elements of greatness in both of them. They just never really hit those heights that some of his previous films did, or even X as far as this trilogy goes. So yeah, I don't know. I think this franchise really hangs on what you think of Mia Goth, because it seems like the hardcore Mia Goth fans fucking love this franchise. Absolutely love it. And and again, that's fine. You like who you like. I'm not going to give anybody shit for what they like, but
well, I'll say this. I think a lot of that is because it's never supposed to have intended to be a trilogy. It was only became a trilogy because of COVID.
Right. Yeah. Very,
I was going to say that because I was going to say they were filming X, and then they got stuck in New Zealand because of the lockdowns, and so Mia Goth said, "Well, why don't I just make a backstory on Pearl for us to do something since we're stuck here?" And then that's how we got Pearl. And
right.
Then it was like, okay, well, let's just finish it off and move to the 90s or move to the 80s.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I was gonna say
something else we can blame COVID for.
So I was gonna say it was never intended to be one. It was supposed to be a one-shot film.
Yeah, and that's why that explains perfectly why the one-shot film was awesome and should have just ended with that. Instead, we get two tacked-on sequels, or one tacked-on prequel and one tacked-on sequel that obviously weren't thought out nearly as much as X was. I mean, Ty probably had a lot of time to work on X, years to prepare and write and everything else, whereas if they did this because of the pandemic, they probably threw these stories together. They probably tagged along on the the Night Stalker murders for Maxxxine, even though it really has no bearing on our story at all. Like I said, it's almost misadvertising. Another reason I'm glad I don't watch trailers, because I would have gone into this expecting, I would have gone into this expecting it to be Maxxxine versus the Night Stalker based on the trailers that I was seeing. But, again, another reason to not watch trailers. All right, gentlemen, anything else you want to say before we get into what should be a fairly quick walkthrough?
I don't want to keep you waiting longer than necessary.
Yeah.
Really, man. It's the end of the week. I want to get out of here and do something fun. Okay, so let's get into it, folks. Our movie is set in Los Angeles, 1985, and our movie opens with a video, like somebody's watching a black and white video, and on the video we see a very young Maxxxine using her real name, Maxxxine Miller. And she's basically, it's almost like an audition video where she's dancing, she's doing a little dance on stage, And then after her dance, we hear a voice come up from, the ether, and basically asking her, so how do you feel? How did that go? Blah, blah, blah. And then, Maxxine talks about her dreams and what she wants. The disembodied voice says, what are you willing to do to reach your dreams? And, Maxxine says, of course, anything I want, or anything that needs to be done, whatever it takes. And then she basically says, I want to be just like you someday, Daddy. And that's pretty much the end of our cold open. And like I said, it is now 1985, Los Angeles, and the movie opens up with Night Stalker newsreel footage, multiple different channels reporting on the Night Stalker murders, all the bodies that are being found, everything else. We find that Maxxine Minx is auditioning for a film called The Puritan 2, which is a horror film, and despite her only having done adult films before this, obviously, from the events of X, we know that she is a porn star. This is her first foray into doing more legitimate cinema. And The Puritan 2 is a horror film. It is a sequel to a fairly popular horror film, The Puritan, of course, that was released a couple of years previously. They are now filming a sequel. She auditions, gives a fairly good audition, actually. And I'm actually glad that they skipped the end of that video until the end, because it would have just made me hate Maxxine even more. I'll explain what the end of the video was later. But at this point, we see her audition. We see that the director, the producer, and the casting agent are all there, asking her very basic questions. And then they have her read one of the lines. She absolutely kills it. But because she absolutely kills it, when she walks out, she tells all the other girls that are in line next for the audition that they might as well go home because she just fucking killed it. Blah, blah, blah. So again, she's got that attitude that I'm a star, or I'm going to be a star and no one can tell me otherwise type attitude that we're already familiar with. So after the audition, she still works in the adult industry. She's not doing films anymore, but now she's stripping at clubs and dancing, doing private booths, private dances, things like that. While at her job, at her first job, she talks to one of her friends, Amber, I believe is the girl's name, talking about how, oh, cool. I got this job. I got the audition, or I auditioned. It's looking good that I'm going to get the role, blah, blah, blah. And this girl is obviously happy for her. She ends up inviting her to a party up in the Hollywood Hills. Maxxine ends up declining because she has to go to her second job. And her friend basically complains how she's always working, blah, blah, blah. Maxxine ends up going to her second job, which is a peep show. So her first job is just kind of a straight up the stripping type thing, and then the second one is the peep show. While she's at the peep show, a mysterious leather-clad stranger watches her, and it looks like he's getting angrier and angrier with her as he's watching her. She's dancing, she's doing what she's supposed to, and she's dancing in front of a one-way mirror, so she can't see the guy in the booth. But we, as the audience, can see that he's wearing a long black trench coat, wearing a hat, and wearing black gloves. So already we're getting those giallo vibes. Unfortunately, that's all the giallo vibes we really get from this movie, is the fact that this guy is a black-gloved killer, but I digress. Let's see. After that, after her second shift at the peep show, she ends up meeting with another friend of hers, another adult entertainer named Tabby. And then Tabby is played by Halsey, the pop star. And basically, Tabby also invites her to that same party up in the Hollywood Hills, and she talks about how, you got to take a tram up there because it's way up in the Hollywood Hills. You got to park at the bottom of the hill, and that is valid. I can vouch for that. That is true. There are houses in the Hollywood Hills that you got to take a tram to get up to because the walkway would be a killer. Like the staircase would be just death. So, yeah, you got to have a tram. And, of course, it's all rich people up there. Like, no average income person can afford a tram leading up to their house. So, anyway, like I said, Tabby / Halsey invites invites her to the same party that Amber invited her to. Maxxine declines again. Later that evening, she's hanging out with a friend of hers, a black dude from the video store. What the hell was his name? I forgot already. Leon. Leon was his name. Basically, and like I said, Leon just seems to be a platonic friend. He lives above the video store, so I guess she kind of hangs out with him periodically. Then, like I said, after Maxxine walks out of that first scene in the video store, that's when Leon makes that line of, "I'm the only guy that's not trying to fuck you." He doesn't say it to her. He kind of says it under his breath as she's walking away, which is what led me to believe that he might be one of our red herrings for the movie. So anyway, while she's that night, she's hanging out with Leon. They are watching The Puritan. They are watching the first Puritan, so that she can kind of get her chops up and get because apparently she probably hasn't seen the film yet. After the film is over, we hear a knock at the door, and don't forget, this is Leon's apartment. This isn't Maxxine's place. Maxxine gets up to answer the door because Leon is asleep on the couch, and we see a quick image of the man in black going into the elevator, and then Maxxine looks down and sees that there's a package left at the door. Opens up the package, it's a videotape, and it says for Maxxine. She pops in the videotape, and what's on the tape? It's the footage from the porn that they were shooting in X. And if you remember correctly, everyone died at the end of X except for Maxxine. So none of that footage should have survived. That footage should have all gone to the police. They should have confiscated it, put it in a vault, and it should have never been released. But somehow somebody has access to it, and they just sent me a videotape of it. Now, at this point, we are introduced to Kevin Bacon's character. Kevin Bacon plays a private investigator, and he has been tasked by his employer to find Maxxine Minks. When he first talks to her, he talks to her under the guise of almost like they think that she committed the murders in the first movie in X, because they talk about how Howard and Pearl had been killed and all the other people involved with the porn shoot all died that day, and that she was the only one who survived, but she just took off. She did, we saw X. From the events at the end of X, after Maxxine takes care of Pearl, she just keeps going. She leaves. It's not like she sticks around to give the police her story. So, of course, she gets defensive, saying, I did what I had to do to survive. I'm not responsible for what was happening out there, blah, 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 blah. Now, Kevin Bacon doesn't care. Kevin Bacon, like I said, he's just the messenger. He's a private investigator. He's been tasked with finding this girl. So at the end of their little meeting, he basically hands her an envelope with an address on it. The address is 166 Starlight Road, and basically tells her that there's going to be his employer would like her to visit that place, that address. She ends up throwing the thing away because she has no interest in dealing with this. She doesn't want to have to, because it's obviously not the police. Because if it was the police, they would have just come and arrest her. So obviously there's something else more nefarious going on. So she decides, fuck it. Now, let's see. We also are introduced to a couple of LA police detectives, Williams and Torres. At one point, they question Maxxine about Tabby and Amber, but Maxxine isn't aware that they've been murdered at this point. Oh, by the way, yeah, Tabby and Amber do end up getting murdered. The two girls that went to the party at the Hollywood Hills, Halsey and the other girl that from the first club that she was working at, they end up being, murdered, which obviously makes Maxxine realize, oh shit, they both invited me to the same party, and they're both now dead, so maybe there's something to this. The police detectives want to ask for her help, but of course Maxxine has a general rule of not speaking to police. She wants nothing to do with them and just kind of tells them to fuck off. Later that day, or later that evening, we find out that Kevin Bacon's private investigator is actually working with the man in black. We see him in a car, and the man in black with, the leather gloves and the long black coat and the hat, is sitting in the back seat. He never speaks. We don't actually get to hear his voice, in person. But obviously Kevin Bacon is working for this person. Now, at one point, the director of The Puritan 2, who is a female, requests that Maxxine come down to the set of her new movie that she's working on, not The Puritan 2, but another movie that she's working on, so that she could meet the star of the original Puritan, so that she can kind of get some pointers. Because don't forget, this is Maxxine's first legitimate film. So, she got the role based on her passionate audition, but she's still unproven, an unproven actor. So she goes and she meets the girl from The Puritan, who's actually in the process of shooting a flashback scene for The Puritan 2. So actually, no, this was The Puritan 2 set. I'm so sorry. Yes, because they were shooting a flashback scene. Even though this girl died in the original Puritan, they're shooting a flashback scene that will be in The Puritan 2. So Maxxine and her get together. They decide, they're exchanging. I mean, Maxxine's not really talking much. She's just kind of there because the director kind of forced her to. Not really forced her, but requested her to. And Maxxine's going to do anything that her director asks. So they end up having kind of a tepid conversation. Like, the other girl who was in The Puritan is kind of excited to meet Maxxine. Maxxine seems kind of put off and isn't really all that interested. And then they end up ending the conversation with the original actress calling her Nadine and closing her trailer door on her, which of course kind of upsets Maxxine a little bit. She just kind of makes a sneer and just kind of walks away. While walking away, as it turns out, she is on is it the Universal? No, it's or Paramount. I forget which set. No, it's the Universal set, right? That
Universal, yeah.
Yeah, it's Universal.
Yeah, Universal.
So she's actually on the Universal set, and she actually earlier in this scene, she was given the tour by her director, and they actually go by the Bates Motel, location. With the house up on the hill and then the motel down at the bottom. And they actually have a cute little story where they talk about how I can't believe they shot a sequel here just a couple of years ago, which is correct because Psycho 2 came out in 1983 and this movie is set in 1985. So the continuity is good at least. So that's one thing. But like I said, after she speaks to the star of the original Puritan, who, by the way, mentions that she's been invited to a party by a foreign producer up in the Hollywood Hills. Sound familiar? So, as Maxxine is leaving the set, Kevin Bacon's character, the Private Eye, shows up again. Now, at this point, I forgot to mention that Maxxine actually beats the shit out of him in an earlier scene, because this guy is literally following Maxxine around and videotaping her, literally filming her. She notices this at one point, gets out of her car, puts her keys in between her fingers to make like makeshift brass knuckles. She goes up to Kevin Bacon I'm going to give Mia Goth credit for this. I fucking love this scene. She walks up to Kevin Bacon like an absolute badass, pulls the camera out of the car, smashes it on the ground, and just starts pummeling the shit out of Kevin Bacon. Literally, the side of his head is all covered in blood, and she literally just says, "If you follow me again, I'll fucking kill you." And she gets in her car and leaves. Kevin Bacon, like I said, half of his face is just covered in blood. He's all pissed off. He's like, "Well, you fucked up now, girly. You can forget about ever working in this town again," which was obviously never the intention. That was just the threat that he made. So anyway, Kevin Bacon's character shows up after the ass whooping on the set and actually pulls out his gun and gives chase. Like he's just going to flat out kill Maxxine in broad daylight on the Universal Studios set. Now, like I said, Kevin Bacon gives chase. We see that the studio is mostly empty. I guess there's not a lot of work going on that day because there's like nobody else on the set. Eventually, though, Larry Fessenden, playing a security guard on the Universal set, shows up and saves the day just as Maxxine actually goes in to the Bates, the house up on the hill. And literally Kevin Bacon is walking up to the door to walk in himself, and then Larry Fessenden shows up. Love this cameo. It's an absolutely unnecessary cameo, but I fucking loved it. I don't care. I'm a big Fessenden head, so yeah, I dug it. And he actually does save Maxxine, so, you know, go figure. He did his job. He actually did his security guard job. What ends up happening is eventually Maxxine finds out that Leon has been murdered now, so she's starting to realize that all of her friends around her are being murdered. The two girls at the beginning, Leon, Lord knows who else, but basically just people around her are being murdered. And someone is very obviously after her. Obviously, the guy who's paying Kevin Bacon to find out where Maxxine was. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip towards to the end of the movie now. There's going to be scenes that I forget here and there. Basically, in the third act, she realizes that she still has that envelope with the address on it that Kevin Bacon gave her. So she puts two and two together, realizes that her friends were murdered when they got invited to a party up on the Hollywood Hills. So she takes the address. She ends up going to the address, like I said, 166 Starlight Lane or Starlight Road, whatever it was. Luckily for her, the two police detectives, the two homicide detectives, are actually following her. Damn lucky for her, as we'll see moving forward here. So when Maxxine gets to the house, it doesn't seem like there's anybody there, but then she hears a video start playing in a room upstairs. Slowly, she starts to realize that it's the video from the beginning of the movie that we saw, the video of little Maxxine Miller dancing on stage at church. She realizes, I mean, it doesn't quite dawn on her yet why it's playing, but then she walks into the room, and lo and behold, there's an old man sitting at the desk. And yes, my friends, it's Ernest Miller. It's fucking Maxxine's father, who is a pastor who you might remember from the videotape footage. If you remember, Pearl and Howard's TV was on at one point, and they were showing a preacher, preaching on stage. That was Maxxine's father. I don't know if we knew that back then in X. No, we definitely didn't know that in X. So yeah, and it's kind of cool how they tied the two movies together. So this guy, as it turns out, has started a cult. Well, maybe not a cult, but an organization of like-minded Christians who are against the how can I put it? The exploitation of their children, as they put it. So basically, all the members of this cult have families have members of their family that have run away to Hollywood to become stars or, to do whatever. You know what I mean? So they basically look at it as Hollywood stole our children from us. So the big plot is they're going around and, they're trying to get Maxxine. The initial plan is to actually kill Maxxine on camera and give her exactly what she wanted, in a sense of the word. Maxxine wanted to be a big star. Her dad wants to make her a big star by killing her on camera. And, she'll basically, I don't know that she'll be a big star, but I mean, she'll definitely have some notoriety for a little while. Definitely. Anybody who's ever died on live television always has some notoriety. May I remind you about Bud Dwyer from back in the early 90s. But anyway, luckily for Maxxine, because she was followed by the two police detectives, they show up just as they're about to brand her. Now, all of the people that this organization killed, I mean, like I said, if you want to say that the dad actually killed all those people, which is hard to believe that this old man who can barely get around, somehow killed two young women and then a young black guy in his own video store. It's really hard to believe. So it's probably easier to believe that it was another member of the cult, maybe, that they sent out instead of the actual, Ernest Miller himself. But the point is, and the other thing is that they've been branding people with a pentacle, a pentagram with a circle around it, to make it imply that they are Night Stalker copycats. So, so at first these murders are chalked up as Night Stalker murders, but then they realize that the MO isn't the same, that they're actually being branded with this symbol instead of being carved into it the way the Night Stalker was doing, where he was actually carving pentagrams into people. This one, they're branding people. So the news is aware that there's a copycat out there, but obviously they don't know who. So back to the Hollywood Hills, the house up on the hill. We see all the cult members surrounding the pool. In the middle of the pool, there's like a little island where Mia is tied up. Like I said, just as they're about to brand her, just as he pulls out the brand and is about to put it on her skin, the police officers show up and a big old gunfight ensues. And I got to give credit to these two police officers. They take out like a good 6 to 9 people in this scene, in just a straight up, gunfight, back and forth gunfight. 2 people take out a bunch of these cult members. So apparently these cult members weren't very good with their weapons. They didn't get the training that homicide police officers get. Cause they were missing constantly. At one point during the gunfight, the cult leader, Pastor Miller, leaves the house. He starts running up the hill towards the Hollywood sign. Yes, our movie is going to have a finale at the Hollywood scene. Where else would the finale of this movie be but at the Hollywood sign? So the first detective gives chase. He ends up getting shot right in the chest and unfortunately doesn't last very long. So after he dies, Maxxine continues to give chase. She's following the police detective, the female police detective who's still chasing Pastor Miller. Eventually, she sees that the female detective has also already been shot, and all that's left is her and her father, basically. She does end up getting the upper hand on him because he had gotten shot. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention he got shot during the initial gunfight at the house, at the pool, and apparently his injuries are finally catching up to him because we see that he's on the ground. He's kind of incapacitated. He did just kill 2 homicide detectives, but yes, he is on the ground, incapacitated. Maxxine has a sawed-off shotgun in her hand that she pulled off from one of the cult members. And just as she's about to stand above her father and shoot him, a police helicopter shows up, floating right above her. And at that exact moment, she ends up having like a daydream, like a hallucination, if you will, where she dreams that after this whole situation, she ends up becoming a big, big star. She ends up selling her life rights so that they're going to write a book about her life, and then eventually, which will become a movie. The Puritan 2 is like the #1 movie in America. It's very obvious that this is a dream because everything is it's too idyllic. She's in this beautiful gown. She's talking to an interviewer. And then finally, the interviewer asks her, well, what was your inspiration to get to where you are today? And that's when Maxxine starts to say, well, my father taught me one thing when I was younger, and that one thing is a statement that they repeat during the video early in the movie where they go, where Maxxine goes, I will not accept a life that I don't think I deserve. And we hear her say that. We hear Pearl say it in X, different characters, different Mia Goth characters say it periodically throughout this trilogy. And just as she's about to, in the interview, it's a red carpet interview. She's dressed in a beautiful gown. She's being interviewed. And just as she's about to say the phrase, it goes back to the present day. And so we realize that it was a hallucination. She's still standing above her father. The police helicopter is still above her, telling her to drop the weapon. Don't do anything stupid. Like the police already know it's Maxxine. They even talk to her by name. They know it's Maxxine, blah, blah, blah. But she basically says, okay, Dad, say it with me. And then they literally say it together. I will not accept a life that I don't think I deserve. And at that moment, Maxxine pulls the trigger and we get a glorious head explosion. one of the nicer laying flat on the ground head explosions I think I've ever seen. It actually looks really, really nice. Whether it's practical or CG, I'd have to watch the movie again, which will never happen, so I guess I don't care that much, but it's probably practical. It looks pretty good. It's Ty West. I'll trust that it was practical. And I forgot to mention that when Maxxine first realizes that it's her dad who's the killer and they're at the house in Hollywood, there's a couple of suitcases at the top of the stairs. When Maxxine realizes that it's her dad, she tries to run away. She actually knocks over one of the suitcases and out pops the actress from the first Puritan movie, but she's in pieces. Her head is cut off, her arms and legs are severed. She's basically just a crossword puzzle now, or a puzzle. She is now a puzzle. And and it's very obviously her because the severed head, she's literally making the same face that she makes on the cover of the Puritan, the kind of the silent scream type look. So that was interesting. So at this point she has killed her father. All the rest of the cult members are either killed or arrested. And then we get to see the actual rest of the movie. And it's just a quick scene of Maxxine still on the set of a film with the same director from the Puritan 2. And the movie basically ends with her saying, "I don't want this to ever end." Talking about her fame, her notoriety, blah, blah, blah. And the movie ends with Betty Davis eyes playing over the closing credits. And that's your film, friends. Like I said, very much a police not a full police procedural. This isn't Seven necessarily, but it has elements of police procedural. It has elements of like a buddy cop drama. It's got elements of Charles Bronson movies where he's like 10 Till Midnight, where he's hunting a serial killer in that movie as well. It just, like I said, it just doesn't check off those horror movie boxes that I really need. Some decent gore, but just not enough. Too many off-screen kills. A lot of that just hindered the movie for us, and especially because we got so much out of the first X as far as good kills and things like that, and then it's kind of diminished from then. As far as the kills go, we've gotten diminishing returns, but otherwise, folks, that's the trilogy. Hopefully, I never have to watch any of these movies again, though I am willing to watch X again because I did love it. So, back to you, Mike.
Yeah, so for a hot minute in the movie, I thought there was a chance that maybe the star of the first Puritan would have been the murderer out of like jealousy, because there was like it's been about a week since I've seen it. I think it was the director maybe who made like the comment that like while the actress from the first Puritan was like good within like the genre for like that specific movie, she's probably, her stardom's never gonna likely go beyond it. Right. But with Maxxine, she sees like this being like the first step to possibly like being like a bigger star. So I thought maybe obviously that went away as soon as her body turned up in pieces. So yeah, as far as the trilogy goes, I still think X is my favorite, and it's the funny thing is it's probably like the most standard horror movie as far as like, yeah, we've seen this type of thing before, we've seen this aesthetic before, but I just thought it was like replicated pretty well. The kills were cool. I liked the story. I liked the cast, and Mia Goth's character wasn't necessarily like the main star in it, even though she's the one that survived. With Pearl, I thought Mia Goth, it was basically a showcase for Mia Goth, but I didn't think the story was all that compelling. It was just kind of like, let's watch Mia Goth go crazy for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then with Maxxine, like I've already said my piece on it, I thought it was a pretty good setup with the first act, and then the movie just kind of meandered and got a little convoluted and ended up being a little silly. I don't know why. It seems like so many people have come down on X though over the years. I don't understand it, but everyone can like what they like. But yeah, I would probably rank them in order that they came out. But Pearl and Maxxine, like I haven't seen X or Pearl in a while, so I would probably have to watch Pearl again to see like if I put it over Maxxine or Maxxine over that. It's close, but so that'd be my ranking.
For me, it's very clearly X, Maxxine, Pearl. I
agree.
Yeah, I just didn't like Pearl. I didn't like Pearl at all. It felt like an hour and 45-minute waste of my time. There was no arc. There was no explanation as to why. It's kind of like what we were just talking about with the Quiet Place prequel last week. It's a prequel that gave us no new information. Well, what new information did we get from Pearl that we didn't already know from X? You know, she was a crazy old woman who killed people with her husband, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, we might get and honestly, no, we don't even really get much of that because we don't even get Howard until the very end of Pearl. So, like, there's so much that they skipped, you know, relevant storylines that they kind of skipped. Like, you know, how did Howard react when he came home to find that Pearl had killed her parents and her best friend? Obviously, he couldn't have had that much problem with it because he stayed with her long enough to die in X, you know, with her. So it's just, yeah, this movie just left me wanting so much more from a director that I absolutely love. I felt like this entire trilogy overall is just very middle of the road to me. As much as I loved X, Pearl brings it down, and then Maxxine is just that middle of the road movie that didn't even really need to be made ultimately. Like, I don't even know what the point of this movie was. Like, I didn't care enough about Maxxine at the end of X that I wanted to follow her. Of all the final girls, of all the horror final girls that we've had over the decades that they could have followed after the horror movie, they picked this one. And yeah, it just didn't work much for me. I mean, yeah, Mia Goth in X was kind of a throwaway character for me. Like, and not Pearl. I mean, Maxxine in X literally could have been anyone. It wasn't all that vital a role until we get to Maxxine, until we get to the sequel.
If anything, Jenna Ortega's character, I forgot her name, but she's the one that had somewhat of an arc in the movie.
Absolutely, yeah. She had the only arc in the movie, in all honesty. I would have loved to have seen. Honestly, I would have loved to have seen her be the final girl, just to see where she goes after X, because, you know, X was. She wasn't a porn star. She just did her first scene, you know, during that production of that movie on X. And she did it kind of standoffishly, too. It's not like she was, you know, ultra excited to do it. It was just something that looked interesting to her, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, it started a string of events that led to the third act of X. But yeah, I was way more interested in Jenna Ortega's character. That whole dynamic with her and her boyfriend, so much more interesting than anything Maxxine did in that movie, in X. So, yeah, what are you going to do? All I can say is I'm glad it's finally over.
Well, I would hold off on that because supposedly Ty West says he's working on a fourth one.
Fucking dare. Don't you fucking dare, Ty West.
Hey, we still have the 90s and 2000s.
Is this going to have to be like The Purge, where I just boycott it? Where I just put my foot down and I'm like, no, we're not reviewing that. Sorry. We're never doing a Purge movie on this show ever again. I don't care if they release 6 more Purge movies. We're never fucking doing one on this show.
Well, I think the problem with doing another one, if it's centered around like Maxxine, is like, well, now that the person that was after her for murdering her is dead, because like I've been listening to some other reviews on Maxxine, and like,
but then you're just getting
one
into
idea
this...
that kind of came up was like possibly like going like 10-15 years down the road, where like maybe she's kind of like a Hollywood washout. Like after her role in The Puritan 2, she never did make it big, and she's kind of like a flailing actress, so like following her then. But it's like, okay, but what's the horror movie in it though? That's the problem. Unless it would just not be a horror movie straight up. I don't know.
Maybe she moves to New York and now she's got to deal with the son of Sam.
Yeah, or I mean,
Yeah, but then you
because
just
I
kinda
really
know-
don't want them to be like, oh, it's another person from the cult coming after her. That would be horrible.
No, yeah, no,
Because
that's
that would
awful.
just be recreating the Scream movies. Because it's just like, what stupid, convoluted person or reason are we going to have for this person to go after Sydney again?
I love it. Love
Yeah,
it.
true. Very true.
Oh man.
All right.
All right, let's end my pain already.
Okay. Well, we will seal the deal with you letting everyone know where else they can hear you if there's anything new.
Let's see. The Crystal Lake Gift Shop, episode 5. I am just about done editing that. I've been taking my sweet ass time editing it because that show, there's no real schedule for that show, so there's not a gigantic hurry. I will definitely be done with it by the weekend. We record on Thursday. Today is Thursday. I'll be done with it by the weekend, and it should be out by the time the next episode of Fresh Cuts is out. And like I said on that one, Mike and our guest Lacey Lou looked at the Halloween episode from season 1 of Friday the 13th, the series. On Creature Comforts, episode 26 is still our latest episode where we looked at The Nest, some cockroach run amok. We should have another episode sooner than later. I think we picked our movie, so it's just a matter of getting together to record it. And then, unfortunately, the main show did get postponed again last week. Again, this was on me, folks. Going a month without your wife and then suddenly having her home. Podcasting was just not a priority for me last week. So, yeah. So, hopefully, as of right now, knock on wood, we're tentatively scheduled to get together this weekend to do the next episode of the main show. And actually, Lacey Lou will be joining us for that episode as well. So another guest spot for Lacey. And I think that's it for me. No more other guest spots or anything. I'm still on the hardcore job hunt, so I'm not podcasting nearly as much as I'd like. That's it for me.
All right. How about you, Don?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Creature Comforts, I think we've got our film set up. I was actually about to hit it up when I got home, but then we figured out when we were going to be doing this one. So I guess we'll probably talk, sooner rather than later about recording dates. I guest spotted on NFW. They're doing a Shark Week, so yours truly is involved. We've recorded 3 at the time of this episode. The first one is now out. I should be doing 2 more with them, but I don't know how many they're planning on doing. The first one out is on the Italian film D Blood, which was pretty fun. We'll keep you in suspense on the others as of now, just because, like I said, I don't know how many they're doing, but I will be with them for the entire duration of that. So keep your ears out for that. And the only other thing is season 3 of Horror Countdown is available for you all, just like the other 2. We are just waiting on the new year to start up again, but go ahead and listen to season 3. But other than that, don't have much.
All right. And for me, I haven't really been doing anything other than our shows lately. I went through the process of getting a new laptop, so that kind of took me out of commission anyway for potentially to record anything. So other than that, like we might be doing another episode of Crystal Lake Gift Shop soon. The main show is scheduled, so if nothing comes up for that should be getting done this weekend. And then the next episode of Fresh Cuts, it's a highly anticipated one, at least for myself. Long Legs, that comes out actually today because we're recording this episode later in the week than usual. So I probably won't see it tonight, but it does come out today. So
I'll probably see it Saturday.
Yeah, I'm thinking Saturday because I have a weekend where I don't think I have much going on, so I don't need to try to fit it in anywhere else, and it's hot, so the movie theater has good air conditioning. So
Sometimes too good. I'm cold in there sometimes. God damn.
Let's see. Yeah, that's all I got. But For people that listen to the episode, let us know when we post it. Like, rank the trilogy in the comments if you want, because I am kind of interested to see. A lot of people rewatched the first two going into this one, so maybe their memories of them are more fresh. I kind of did it off the top of my head, just based on the memories of watching them. So, yeah, I'm sure we'd like to hear just everyone's opinion on where they rank everything, as well as their thoughts on Maxxxine itself. So leave those comments everywhere the episode is posted. Everywhere or anywhere, either one. But that said, yeah, we'll be back. It'll be a shorter amount of time since... Yeah. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
If you do adult videos, you're never going to be a movie star. Let me repeat that. If you've done adult videos, you will never be a movie star. I'm done.
Peace.